I'm only recording this blind. How bad could it go? Hey party people and everyone else. Welcome back to Fashion Design with Hannah. This is going to be part 2 of the How to Recreate Your Favorite Jacket but Make It Better series. If you haven't seen part 1, where have you been? Go ahead and check that out in the link in the description down below. And while you're at it, go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you'd also like to know how to choose your fabric and fit your muslin for your new jacket, those will be Instagram and Facebook exclusives, so be sure to follow one or both, and I'll leave links for those in the description down below. Channel promo aside, this is going to be a longer video just like the first part was, and that is because making jackets takes a lot of time, just as I said in the first video. And I also realized partway through that I was using the old tech pack file. I wasn't using the updated one with all my new measurements in it and a couple other little things along the way. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the patterning and drafting. Alright, so first and foremost with the pattern drafting, we will start with our high point shoulder line and our center front line. That gives us a great way to square up any of these other lines that we'll be making. And obviously it helps if you have an L square. It will help you go all the way to 24 inches, which will cover most of your tops. And then I also have my 18-inch ruler to help with reaching the jacket length. Then I'm going to square it off down here at the bottom so we have a good guide for us. And if I didn't make it clear, this is going to be the front piece. So I am going to do my first measurement here of the sweep width. So for sweep width, we are looking at 11 inches each side. So that's the measurement that I'm paying attention to, the each side measurement. So down here at 11. Then we'll look at our other two really easy measurements, which is our waist width and our hip width. So waist width, we have it down 15 inches from high point shoulder. Here is our waist measurement placement. So we start at 15 inches down from high point shoulder. Then we're going to go out to the waist width at each side measurement, and that is 10 1/4 for my new measurement. I just do a little hash mark here so that way I have the exact point of measurement. Hip width will be 21 inches down. So I'm going to need my L square for that, 21 inches down. And then for the each side measurement, that is hip width of 10 1/2 for the new measurement. Okay, with my little hash mark for the hip. If you want, I can write that out. Hip, waist, and sweep. So this is the start of my draft. And from this draft, I will be making the patterns. If you're not quite familiar with that, I do also have another thing that you could reference, and that is my video where I make a cute little denim vest for my dog, Klondike. Now the reason why I did waist, hip, and sweep width first is because they had their easy placement measurements to go from, and I just had to measure this out. For the chest width, I do actually have to plot my armhole point and then do 1 inch below that, and that'll give me my chest width. You could do chest width at armhole if you wanted. We just tend to do 1 inch below armhole in the industry because it tends to be a little bit easier to measure on the final product. I'll do the easy way, which is looking at the armhole depth straight down from high point shoulder, and that is 11 3/4. So 11 3/4 is right here. And then 1 inch down is where our chest measurement is at. So that would be 12 3/4. And then we go out for the chest width of 10 1/2. So we'll go with that shoulder width next, and we did the across shoulder seam to seam, which that is the whole garment, while we need only what we're going to be looking at, which is the half. So the full across shoulder seam to seam is 16, while my across shoulder, looking at it for just the half piece, will be 8 inches. So we're going to go out 8 inches and just mark that for now. Notice that it will be a smaller width than the chest measurement. So if you're adjusting your specs and you start plotting them out and you see that the shoulder width is further out when it is a set-in sleeve. That is not good. You're gonna have to look at your specs once again. You're then going to look at our neck width, which is seam to seam. So that is also a whole measurement, and we need a half. So the whole measurement is 7.5. So that means our half measurement will be 3 3/4. Let's go ahead and plot that out. 3 3/4 from our high point shoulder. Just make a little notch there. And then continuing on the widths, we have the across chest measurement, and that is 5 inches below the high point shoulder, seam to seam. So we'll look at 5 inches down, make that little mark there. So we have 5 inches down, and the full measurement is 15.5. So the half measurement of that is 7 3/4. So we will mark that out here, 7 3/4. So you see we have this nice shape coming in. This is the shoulder area. We haven't plotted the exact shoulder point yet. And then we can come down here for 5 inches down, and then all the way out to here for a chest. So it's a nice set in sleeve swoop. So in order to get that shoulder point that is out here somewhere, we are going to go out to where the shoulder seam width is, and then go down by the shoulder seam slope. If we look at our tech pack, we have a shoulder slope to the armhole seam of 1.5 inches. So we are going to come down 1.5 inches from our little mark of the shoulder seam width, and that is our shoulder point. You can then look at our front neck drop, so from high point shoulder seam to the center front edge. That will be 3 inches down. We can now go ahead and plot our front neck drop from high point shoulder seam to center front edge. So we'll be looking at it vertically, and that will be a 3-inch drop. So we can go ahead and mark that down here. There's our 3 inches. So here is where our curve of the neck seam will be. Then we can go ahead and look at our break point. And since I did up from hem and I liked where it's at, so the break point will be staying at 18.5 inches. We'll go ahead and mark that on our center front. Ooh, I've been calling this my center front the whole time. This is actually the front edge. So I'm glad I caught myself before I went too far, because this would have turned out to be a slight disaster. So I have been lying to you. This is not the center front. This is the front edge, aka the edge of the finished garment. I'll bring up a picture to show you on the actual jacket. Yeah, so you actually do still need to plot out your center front here. That will be considered your center front extension, which is all the way out here. If you were to be looking at, say, a cardigan, you'd have the center front and then a placket, and then that's where the buttons would go. So in order to plot your center front line, you are going to look at one of the full jacket widths, and then you are going to look at the half measurement of that. So on the original jacket, it is a center front line that is 1 1/4 inch in from the front edge, and I will be doing the same 1 1/4 inch. So we're just going to put that in right now before going any further. And we're going to clearly mark it. Here's the front edge, little arrow, and here is the center front. Ta-da! This is why I am not a pattern maker as my job. Now we can look at the shoulder width and the neck width and plot those points. For the shoulder width, we're looking at the across shoulder seam to seam measurement. On the original, that is 15.5, and the new measurement is 16. We will then take that half measurement and take it out from our center front, because the center front is the middle of the garment. 8 inches away on the high point shoulder is out here. So we are going to look at our armhole depth from the high point shoulder. The new measurement is 11 3/4 down from that, as I wanted to add a 1/2 inch because the armhole is really cutting in underneath my arm. So we are going down from our shoulder width measurement 11 3/4. So that'll bring us right down to here. And then we are going to go out 12 3/4. And that is from the each side measurement that I just did. So this gave us our vertical positioning for the armhole, and now we are going out for the horizontal positioning. Oh no, something's wrong. So I noticed that the side seam shape was looking a little weird, so I just went ahead and fully remeasured the jacket. I noticed that I had probably didn't fully roll out the bottom sweep because of the pocket when I was measuring, and so that threw off the lower measurements, and so I just replotted those all using the same methods that I had just shown you. So now we can go about doing the underarm point and that chest 1 inch below point and have it look okay. So from there, I'm going to place the chest at armhole measurement, and that is 12 3/4. Ta-da! All right, so now this is looking a lot better. So now that we have our framework set up, we can go ahead and start truing in the lines. I will complete that shoulder shape once I have trued in the neckline and the original shoulder line over here, so we can get that shoulder seam forward on the front neck. So this is a handy dandy hip curve. You can use this, you can use a French curve. Some people might have a ship curve or other flexible ruler. I find the hip curve is great for jackets and not for many other regular tops. You can go ahead and use that for the shape from the sweep to your hip, and then you can go ahead and flip it around to connect the hip to the waist. So we have a nice gentle curve here, great for sewing. And then you can go ahead and find something that works between your armhole and your 1 inch below armhole and your waist measurement. So as I started truing in this lovely curve from the sweep to the hip to the waist, I really thought about how short my waist to chest was, and then really investigated because there seemed to be too many measurements off. And that's when I realized that I was working from an old version of my tech pack. It wasn't the fully edited one. So I just rechecked all of the measurements. And I only really rechecked them because I knew what looked right and what didn't look right. So now hopefully the front body piece will be okay. So we are going to finish truing in the waist to chest and make that look all nice. And we can go ahead and draw this line in for the shoulder. And we can come on over to the neckline and square off this extension as there won't be any curve there. And then I will go and get my French curve so we can complete the armhole and the neckline. So now that we have our trusty French curve, we can go ahead and finish this armhole. You can draw a straight line to the across shoulder to start, and then square off the armhole by 1/4 inch, just so that there's no curve there. It makes it easier for sewing. And we'll find a way to blend these all together. Alright, so then we have a nice little armhole curve. I just curved it a little bit more than that straight line to start off with. We can do our neckline as well. You can straighten it off about 1/4 inch here up at the neck shoulder intersection point. And just like the armhole, we can find something that works. I know that there are a few professors that preferred us to eyeball the curves, but I am someone who likes to use tools to help out. And let's not forget about that shoulder seam forward. So we are going to go 1 inch forward in from the neckline intersection point, like that. Okay, and now that we have the general shape down, we can go ahead and add in our princess seam for that lovely shaping. Alright, for the princess seams, we'll start from high point shoulder and go down to where the princess seam hits the armhole seam and make a notch. I really like the placements on the original jacket, so I'm going to do pretty much the same measurements. And then we can go on and mark the princess seam width at the hem. And for good measure, we can add another point in there, such as at the waist or the hip, whichever works best for you. Just like everything else, once you have your points all plotted out, you can go ahead and true the line in and then see if you truly like it. Another small detail you could add is the pocket placement, which for me is a little bit before the princess seam. And let's not forget, this jacket actually has a slight wing up at the side. It's not quite a shirt tail hem, but I'm going to mark it up from the side seam and then blend it down to 0 at the bottom. I also don't know why they decided to make it such a slight wing up at the side seam, because it doesn't make the hem look even. However, it does look pretty cute, so I decided to recreate it. We can also mark the breakpoint on this jacket, which is where the lapel starts to fold back, aka the more visible part of the inside. This will help you decide the facing width later on, and also give you guidance to where you can shape your lapel. I would also say to mark your roll line, which is the break point all the way up to the neck-shoulder intersection point. If you're making a higher end jacket, that is exactly where you would reinforce it. For the most part, you are now done with the front draft for your jacket piece. I will show you how to do facings in the next video, so stay tuned for that. And here's the grand overview of my front jacket draft. With the front draft done, we can now move on to the back, and trust me when I say you should leave yourself enough room to do the back. Also, make sure that you do the back from the left to the right. Don't do right to left is what I did, because when you're going to make a half muslin, you want them to match up. It also makes drafting the collar so much easier, so trust me when I say do your center back on the left side and do everything else on the right. And drafting the back is so similar to the front that I actually don't need to tell you how to do it. You already know how to do all of your from high point shoulder stuff from the front and doing all of your widths as well. However, one of the unique things for doing the back draft is the back shoulder seam forward. So that's where you see the shoulder seam come forward on the jacket. So you can true in your shoulder line and your back neck to start. And then from there, you're going to put your ruler parallel to the line that you did for the shoulder slope, and then you are going to draw out that shoulder seam forward measurement. It's going to be both at the neck and at the armhole. If done correctly, this will help your jacket from leaning forward or backward at the bottom. You can then go ahead and true in the rest of the back just as you did the front. Just be sure that you actually line up the side seams to see if they match up, and same thing with the shoulder. The other thing unique to the back draft is the yoke. So for the yoke, we just come down from the high point shoulder, put that placement down, and then if you have pleats that don't reach the center back, you can then mark those. For me, since I didn't have any pleats that weren't going towards the center back, right at the center back, I didn't have to mark them. That's just going to be on the pattern. So here we are with our final back draft. Time for the sleeve draft. So what we're going to do here is draw our center line just like how we did for the center front and the center back, so we have a good frame of reference, and then we're going to square out at the bottom to our sleeve opening width. Make sure you square it up at the edges so you then have a good shape for sewing. We are then going to mark out that sleeve cap width, which is 3 inches down from the top of the sleeve. This is also the place in the sleeve cap that will probably change the most in its shape, especially if you don't like what you see when you sew the muslin. You will then come down and plot out the muscle width, which is typically 1 inch below the armhole. At this point, I usually just true in the underarm seam so that way I can see what the general shape of the sleeve looks like. And in the most visible frame ever, you see that I am squaring off the top of the sleeve cap, so it's a nice shape. You can then use your French curve to blend from 0 from the muscle all the way up to that 3-inch mark on both sides, then flip it over so you can make a nice curve going up to the top of the sleeve cap. This might be a little bit tricky, so you could freehand it a little bit if you want. After that, be sure to mark the front and back of the sleeve cap, because once it is cut out, it is a little bit hard to tell. To help differentiate, we typically put 2 notches on the back and 1 notch on the front, and you'll snip those once you cut out your sleeve. We'll then head on over to doing the underarm panel, so we'll do that back portion on the draft, just mark it out from the top of the armhole all the way down to the bottom, and then do the same for the front portion of the underarm. We'll then put those together when we do our pattern, but for now, we're just going to leave it as some lines. And if you want to make your cuff and back cap a little bit more fancy and tailored, you can scoop them out a little bit, but for now, I am done with the sleeve draft. And that is where I'll be ending my drafting for now. Part 3 will be coming out soon, so be sure to follow my social media accounts if you want to stay up to date. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and leave those in the comments down below. And if not, I don't know, maybe share this with someone who is interested in pattern making. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Bye. As my dad would probably put it, I did this recording as a Bon Jovi, aka living on a prayer, because I don't have any contacts in because my eyes were too dry.